Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our Planning an ADU in Massachusetts webinar. Looks like we've got the attendees filling up here. So I'm just going to give a brief intro to kind of give you a little bit more information about New England Editions, who is presenting this webinar, and what we offer. I want to make clear that this isn't a sales pitch. This isn't like when you go to a timeshare meeting when you're on vacation or anything like that, where we're just going to be talking about ourselves the whole time. The goal today is to make this very clear and provide honest information on ADUs in Massachusetts, because I know there's a lot of information out there. I know there's a lot of confusing information out there, and also a lot of conflicting information out there. So our goal is to try and make it easy for you to understand exactly what you need to know, all of the considerations that go into building an ADU, and some of the areas where people get hung up and it can become a little bit more difficult or even overwhelming to build an ADU. So all the information we're going to provide today is based off of our experience in the ADU market, building, talking to different town departments, talking to different planning boards and zoning offices in different towns. There's one thing that I need to make clear is that statewide, there are certain regulations that need to be allowed in each town, but town by town, there can be some specific quirks or interesting bylaws that they put in where it can become, there's minor details that need to be considered as well. So we're going to get a little bit more into that later. But of course, when it comes time to actually build and, plan out the build of your ADU, that's where a company such as ours works with the building departments closely to understand exactly what they require and what they need. But we've tried to simplify the process. So New England Editions, a little bit about us. Like I said, we specialize in ADU construction. So we have a streamlined, predictable model that makes building an ADU easier for homeowners such as yourself. New England Editions is powered by Sword Construction, which we are a high-end construction remodeling company that has been in business for over a decade in Massachusetts. So we've tried to take that experience that we have in the construction and remodeling market and apply it to New England Editions and make it, easier and, a little bit more attainable for folks to build ADUs in Massachusetts. Like I said, we're not trying to make this a big sales pitch, but you will see at times I'm going to reference our process and how we do things to help you understand exactly, how easy it can be to build an ADU and bring an ADU to your home. At the end of this session, we're going to have an opportunity to answer some of the questions. So feel free to type in the Q&A section of this webinar any questions that you have, and we're going to try to get to as many of those as we can after we are done going through the basic information here. So let's get started. So ADU's kind of a buzzword right now. It's a hot topic. Seems like last year everybody was talking about ADUs. It's getting around when even my mother's asking me about ADUs and she's asking me what they are, often, mispronouncing the AUDs or DAUs. That's how you know that it's gone mainstream. So, when it comes to ADUs, these aren't anything new. The reason they've become a popular conversation in Massachusetts is because Massachusetts legislation passed the Affordable Homes Act, which allows homeowners to build an ADU by right. This means it eliminates some of the zoning barriers that previously made it a bit more difficult to actually build an ADU on your property and required a longer permitting process, and often, board meetings, town board meetings, and special variances in order to build an ADU. Those have now been eliminated, and it makes it much more realistic for homeowners, than it was even a few years ago. In 2025, they just released some information of the towns that participated. I believe it was close to 1,600 ADU applications, and about 75% of those were approved. So clearly, this law has changed the way that people are able to put an ADU on their property and sort of expedite the process from the permitting side. So why are people building ADUs? One of the most common reasons that we're seeing right now is the multi-generational living. So this is, aging parents or adult children that maybe just graduated college, aren't ready to leave home, but still want to have sort of a sense of independence or privacy. Um, this is we're seeing this very common because, having aging parents that may be experiencing health issues or looking to the future with health issues, having them close by, being able to keep an eye on them, and being able to, sort of, maintain that independence and maintain that independent lifestyle without conflicting with your lifestyle. This is definitely something that we're seeing quite often right now. Flex use space. This is, anything from sort of a guest house, especially if you have family that lives far away and tends to stay for an extended period of time. Allows you to sort of keep living your life while, also having them around without, having a guest within your house that now is, you've got one more person that you've got to share the bathrooms with, etc. Also, home workspace. People that, especially since the pandemic where everybody's working from home, having sort of a separate space from your actual living space where you can go to work. But, in terms of the flex use, it's more importantly about the long term. What you may need right now, those needs may change in the future. So at some point, you may be looking at, an aging parent that moves into that space that was previously used as your work from home office. Or, perhaps you move into the ADU and then, we're seeing a lot of people where, now their adult children with their families are moving into the primary residence and they want to stay close by and give them sort of another opportunity, especially in Massachusetts' crazy housing market. Speaking of that crazy housing market, the property value. You're immediately adding square footage, livable square footage to your existing property. So this is going to increase property values, in the immediate, but also down the line when it comes time to resell your property. You're going to have this option to have sort of this flexible use space for multi-generational living, guest house, whatever it is. It's going to be something that I foresee in the future becoming more of sort of an expected bonus. And it'll be more of a detraction if you don't have an ADU because you won't have that additional space for the buyers that are looking for that. And then last but not least, some rental income. You can create an income generating rental property on your lot, help to offset some of the high mortgage payments, property taxes, or just to generate some extra cash each month, and allow you to plan for your future in a way that you might not be able to by buying an investment property in Massachusetts. Some of the areas as we're talking to customers and clients, that ADU projects can feel really confusing. You know, most homeowners are saying that they're not short on information, they're overwhelmed by it. It makes it hard to understand what you need to know before you get started. And a lot of mistakes can happen before construction even begins, because you're not exactly sure what information you need to be relying on, and what you can trust as you're going through the process of building an ADU. So the conflicting information, when you look online, you see a bunch of different regulations, costs, timelines, and it's hard to differentiate between, what applies to you versus what applies to somebody that lives in another town. What one builder is saying, might cost to build an ADU on your property versus somebody else, and these discrepancies in prices. And then, the town by town differences, that's a huge one that we're seeing. And even when we're talking to building departments now, we're getting a lot of, wow, that's a really good question, because it's still so new that even sometimes the building department isn't exactly sure on some of the specific details of what's allowed and what's not. But, the zoning rules, setbacks, all of these restrictions, it makes it impossible to generalize. And so it can be very confusing what applies to you in your town. Um, Then, of course, there's the unclear cost expectations. There can be very different quotes, whether you're looking at a prefab build or you're looking at a stick build construction. It can be all over the place, and it's hard to tell what quotes include, site conditions, foundation, utility connections, all these site-specific costs, and also what's included in the actual product itself. What finishes are included, materials versus labor. It can be very overwhelming. Uh, Last but not least, the early design decisions. People looking at sort of building their, dream house or dream ADU, with going into the customization, different finish options before actually confirming the feasibility. So we're going to go into that in a moment, but feasibility versus, what you're allowed to build, it's two very different things. So getting a little bit ahead of yourself by looking at those customization options tends to be a major shortfall for consumers as they're looking at potentially building an ADU. All right, now we're going to get into the different types of ADUs. We're going to keep this high level. We can get into more details if this is something that you're interested in. At the end of the webinar, we're going to send out a link to rewatch this webinar so that you can go back and review any information. And you'll have our email from there where we can discuss if you're interested, different options for your property and what would work for you based on your needs. So first and foremost, we have the backyard detached ADU. This is going to be a separate structure from the existing home, and it has, the main benefits are the privacy and the flexibility of placement. So especially when it comes to having family living on your property and wanting to maintain that privacy and independence, this is a great option for you, and especially for the rental income. Purposes, having a separation in space between you and your tenant, this makes sense for a lot of our customers. Um, Now, the attached ADU. Now, this can be either a shared wall, some sort of vestibule that allows entry to the ADU and the existing home, or a hallway for ease of access, which we're finding a lot with sort of the multi-generational aging parents, wanting to keep an eye on them and make sure that everything is safe, but especially looking out the window with 2 feet of snow on the ground, you don't always want to have to put on your boots and coat to go out and check to make sure mom or dad is okay in the ADU out back. You want to be able to just walk through some sort of hallway or entry point that is enclosed. Garage conversion. Now, this can be one of two things, either taking an existing garage and just converting that to the ADU, or also building up over an existing garage and adding a level above that that would be used as an ADU. And then last but not least is the internal ADU. So this is a converted basement or sometimes attic space. This is taking existing space inside of your home, whether finished or unfinished, creating a separate entrance and creating an ADU within the confines of the existing home that you currently live in or own. Next up, so what does this all mean for you? So what can you build by right in Massachusetts? And by right, that means no special permits or variances required. Under the Affordable Homes Act, by right, you're allowed to build up to 900 square feet um, of ADU space, whether in your existing home or as a detached or partially attached unit, or 50% of the gross floor area of the primary dwelling. It's whichever is less. So if you have a 1,600 square foot home, you can build an 800 up to an 800 square foot ADU on or in your property. Um, as far as parking goes, cities and towns can require at most one additional parking space unless you are half mile or less from public transportation. So if you're within that half mile radius, they legally cannot require you to add any additional parking for your ADU. Owner occupancy. Cities and towns cannot require owners to live on site, whether in the ADU that will be built or in the primary residence. Um, they cannot have any restrictions on that. And one thing that I will note here is that Boston is one area in Massachusetts that doesn't follow the state zoning requirements, and they have their own zoning requirements that they're allowed to initiate. So Boston's going to be the one exception to some of these rules, which we can get into a little bit later during the Q&A. But that is something to note here. Every other town, city is required to follow these. Um, and then rental restrictions. Cities and towns are not, they aren't allowed to enforce any rental restrictions other than short-term rentals. So Airbnb or something of the like. These are, for the most part, it's anything that is over 1 month is allowed in terms of rentals. Anything less, that's where you'll start to see some restrictions. Um, Now, when it gets to the town-specific bylaws, the things that you need to look out for that aren't covered under the statewide mandates, lot setbacks. So this is the amount of space between the rear, the side, and the front of the lot. Each town's going to be a little bit different. Sometimes within a town, the actual zoning district will have a different lot setback than a different zoning district in the same town. But this is where we'll go into in a minute, ways that you can sort of explore this. Um, Height limits. There are going to be some height limits. Some towns will not allow 2 stories. Some towns will not allow you to go above a certain number of vertical feet. And then there are some towns where, based on the height limits, it can change the setbacks that are allowed within that town. Um, and then placement on lot. We're finding a lot of towns are against any front yard placement. So you have to be at a minimum at the front of the existing residence. You've got to be behind that. So either in the side yard or the rear yard. Now, examples of site-specific exceptions. Septic capacity and Title V regulations still apply. So if you have a 3-bedroom existing residence and a 3-bedroom septic, you're either going to need to upgrade your septic capacity or eliminate a bedroom from your existing home. This is going to vary town by town exactly what is, what you're able to do in order to meet those septic capacity requirements. But you'll need to pass a Title V in order to tie into that existing septic tank. Uh, Wetlands and environmental restrictions. If you fall within the area where there's either wetlands immediately on your lot or within a wetland buffer zone, then that, along with other environmental restrictions within the town, you're going to need to talk to the Conservation Commission and go in front of their board in order to make sure that we're following the rules that are in place for those zones, which will require one additional step, but there's still ways that we can work through that process and expedite that as well. Uh, and then another example would be, floodplain regulations. If you're within a FEMA flood zone, they have specific building requirements in order to ensure that you are following the necessary protocols in those, flood areas. Zoning versus feasibility. I touched on this briefly, but it's two different questions. Uh, is an ADU allowed? Zoning will answer this question. So based on your town's regulations, lot size, setbacks, uh, how far you have to be from existing structures, it's an easy yes or no question to determine, what is allowed on your property. Now, feasibility addresses, can it be built smoothly? And what factors go into that? So site conditions, utility access, topography, and construction logistics. So timeline, cost, risk level. 2 lots in the same town can have very different feasibility. So zoning is going to tell you if something is allowed. Feasibility tells you whether it's practical, affordable, and predictable. So that distinction is what matters here. Now, when it comes to zoning, Again, this is our chance to pepper in a little bit of what we do here at New England Editions. If you'd like to check out your zoning and what is allowed on your lot, you can go to our website, newenglandeditions.com, and on the homepage, there's going to be a bar where you can type in your address, or you can click the Check My Lot feature, and you can see on your lot what is allowed based on the setbacks for your town, your zoning district, and then what kind of environmental factors there are. So, um, as you can see here, this is just an example, and you can pull up the option that you see on the right-hand side with the map view, where you can check the different layers right here, and then it will show you on the map of your lot. Um, Right here, we've got some wetlands. So this is where your septic setback area is. And this is the wetlands buffer zone, where if you fall within this zone, you're going to need to go to the Conservation Commission. So for this example, we've got an area right here where there is no wetlands buffer, and it's going to be an ideal spot for an ADU. So on this Check My Lot feature, you can even use one of the pre-designed models that we have available, and see how it fits into this, it fits into your lot. And it's going to show you on the exterior of the ADU model. If it's red, that means that there's some kind of restriction, whether setbacks or environmental, that you're running into. But as soon as the red lines go away and turn to blue, that means that that area should be, you shouldn't have an issue building an ADU by right in that area. So now let's get into some costs. So, understanding the cost factors, this is what's going to help you to set realistic expectations, and to focus on the budget from the beginning. Because, as I mentioned before, a lot of times you get into the design, the finishes, customizing, but without looking at how that impacts your budget, you're basically just spending a lot of time on the design. And, if you're going with an architect or a designer-based model, spending a lot of money for plans that will never be able to be built, unless you're banking on winning the lottery. So first and foremost, the ADU size and type. So external units typically cost more than internal conversions, because we're building a new structure. So you've got to consider foundation costs, exterior framing and envelope costs, versus converting a basement into a livable space. So square footage, number of rooms, these are going to directly impact the materials and labor. Site conditions. Uh, Slope. If you're on an unlevel lot, if you live on the side of a mountain and we need to do some extreme excavation in order to level out an area to build an ADU, if there's a considerable amount of ledge that we need to remove from the site, if there's existing wildlife structures, trees, or an old shed, garage, whatever. These are all things that need to be taken into consideration, because the removal of those are going to add to the costs of the required site work in order to actually be able to build something on your lot. Utility connections, distance to water, sewer, electric, gas lines. All of this is going to determine the trenching depth, the connection fees, the complexity of the connection, and those costs can really add up, depending on, the exact site conditions and what would be required in order to, again, connect those utilities. Town requirements. So, any special requirements from the town, septic system upgrades, parking mandates. And if we are going to need any special permits, these are all costs that you need to consider as well. And then the finish level. Material choices and fixtures, these are going to have a huge impact on the cost. And, there's $20 light fixtures, there's $2,000 light fixtures. So if you're just going in and you're going based off of what looks nice and shiny and pretty, you can find yourself at the end looking back at the budget and wondering how the number got so far out of control, versus if you're looking at the project as a whole, determining your budget, and then coming up with finishes from there, then you can make sure that you're staying in line with your budget, and moving forward at a price point that's comfortable for you. some of the common mistakes that we see people run into, oftentimes before they come to us, will be, designing before feasibility. As I said, focusing on the design and not actually looking into what is feasible, whether it's for your site, whether it's for, the zoning restrictions or your budget. All of these design options that you're focusing on before realizing if this actually makes sense for you. That's where we see a lot of people make mistakes and they get hung up and either have, costly, implications as they're already like the project's underway, or makes it impossible to even get to the point of construction because they get derailed a little too early in the process. Um, Underestimating permitting time. So we usually look at about a 30 to 60 day, permitting time frame, depending on the different towns. Some towns may require a longer review and approval process, which can be 2 to 4 months. So it's important where if you're looking to build an ADU, you start the process early enough where you can explore all of your options and make sure that you're not up against a timeline that's unrealistic from the get-go based on the town and the permitting requirements. Um, Third, chasing customization early. This is, again, focusing on those finishes and fixtures before confirming basic feasibility, before determining, a budget that's realistic for you, how much you can actually spend, and then focusing on some of those items that ultimately aren't going to make a difference because you're not going to be able to build the ADU in the first place. And then last but not least is choosing based on price alone. Now, this is where we see a lot of people, hit a brick wall in their ADU, project. You get all sorts of different pricing information online. We hear it all the time that you can build a prefab ADU on your lot for $50,000. You hear that, prices can be, anything below $500,000 isn't quality. You need to be looking at what is actually included in these quotes. So a lot of times those lowball quotes, they're not going to contain either, specific site conditions, utility connections, permits, finished materials. And so then you're just going to end up with a shell that has no electricity and no running water, and you fell within that $50,000 price point. That is not going to be a long-term viable option for you. So what you need to look at is the predictability of the pricing. All right, based on what is included in this price, what gets me from start all the way to finish with final inspection approval, certificate of occupancy. Um, how do I get, what is the entire budget for all of that to get to the certificate of occupancy? And you need to make sure that those prices are included because if you're just chasing that lowest price, it's always going to be the one that doesn't include everything. And you're going to run into a lot of issues where the project's underway and then you realize you need to come up with some more money in order to pay for it and make it a reality. So how we have made this process easier with New England editions. So our approach combines, the benefit of the custom construction that we've been doing with sword and construction for over a decade, with the predictability that homeowners need. And we don't have, we're not gatekeeping the information. We're not requiring you to call one of our, sales representatives in order to get, price or different floor plan options or whatever. We've tried to refine this process specifically for Massachusetts properties and properties in the New England area, where we've taken a look at the overall zoning guidelines, what's allowed, and built our models where, if it can't be built exactly as is, it only takes a few minor tweaks to make sure that it falls within the zoning requirements for each specific town. So we've looked at it from a couple of different angles. One, the use, what people actually need, how people will actually use it, and building it so that it's a comfortable living space that makes sense and is also aesthetically pleasing on your property. So we have pre-designed plans and curated finish packages. So we have 4 different models with each 2 to 3 different floor plans within that model, depending on your needs number of bedrooms, layout preferences, and then our curated finish packages, uh, designed from interior designers, taking quality products that are, both timeless and also look elevated beyond just what you can find if you're walking down, the aisles in one of the big box stores. We've taken it to make it look like it's a custom build without the custom build headache or price point. Um, then we custom build it. So it's a traditional stick-built construction tailored to your property, your lot, and the unique requirements of that lot. So as we look into the site conditions, we make adjustments as needed to our build process to make sure that it works for your property. Transparent pricing. We use fixed costs for standard features. So as you go through our website, you'll see that the starting prices for each of our models all include base finish packages, and everything up until the site conditions and utility connections. That's what we determine at the next phase at the site feasibility visit. But otherwise, the prices that you see on our website are what you get. And I'll show you in a minute, but we also have an option where you can go through and select your finish packages, download your cart, and take a look at what the actual price to build that will be. And then after our site feasibility visit, we give you the final estimate that breaks down the cost that you saw online, and then the cost based on the site conditions, utility connections, or any other restrictions that we find on site. And you can see a very transparent quote of exactly what it costs, where the site costs are coming in and adding to that price. But we try and keep that all incredibly transparent. And again, no need to talk to a sales rep to get that pricing. You can download that from our website. Uh, and then the streamlined process, a structured timeline with defined milestones, regular progress updates, a dedicated project manager for each build, where you can see exactly what that schedule looks like. And based on these pre-designed models, we've built out an efficient process where we know exactly what it takes step by step and how we can move that process along quickly. So, this is a good fit for people that want a predictable timeline without design delays or design headaches along the way, and they want to get started on the build sooner rather than later. You want process and pricing transparency, where we hold your hand throughout that process. And at every point, you're going to know exactly what the price is and what is adding to that price based on your site conditions. And then if you want quality construction, but with an elevated aesthetic that doesn't have that custom price tag. So, we really like to focus on having something that feels nicer than just a shed in your backyard that just so happens to have running water and electricity. We want it to feel like an actual home. Uh, and if you want designer level finishes without the decision fatigue that comes with looking at endless different hardware, faucet, cabinet types, and without that designer price tag, then our pre-curated finish packages are a great alternative for you. And then again, aesthetically pleasing ADU that feels cohesive with your existing home. So, you've come to love the home that you live in. You don't want to be looking out the back window and seeing this ugly shed tree house. Looks like somebody built a fort in your backyard. We want to take it a step above that. We want something that either is cohesive and matches the existing home or accents it nicely. So we don't like to do Frankenstein projects where it looks like we just cobbled together an ADU and put it on your lot. We want it to feel like something that feels like an extension to your home, that is, pleasing for you to look at when you're looking out your back windows. So here is a quick run through of our website. When you get to newenglandeditions.com, if you click on Explore Our Models, you'll see the 4 different options that we offer. Starting prices again include the base package. You can see some renderings of the interior designs. Then you can choose from 2 to 3 different floor plans for each option. Once you go to select your finishes, you'll have roofing, siding, window options to choose from, and then three different packages for both kitchens and bathrooms with different levels of design and different design styles. You'll click the I accept on the existing conditions that reiterates the cost that comes with the site conditions that will determine during the feasibility test. And then you can click checkout and download your PDF. Now, when you download your PDF, we'll require a name and an email address that we can reach out to you to discuss exactly what you chose, and answer any questions that you have. But you'll receive a PDF with all these selections, what the total cost is based on the model, the floor plan, and each finished selection that you have made. So now that I've given you the brief pitch on our company and how we're trying to do things differently, um, that concludes the initial information that we have prepared to discuss with you. And now we'd like to open the floor to your questions. So again, if you'd like to answer or if you'd like to have any of your questions answered, feel free to type them into the Q&A section uh, on your on the Zoom screen, and I can answer those for you now. All right, so the first question, uh, can the homeowner live in the ADU and rent out the main house? Yes, and we're actually seeing this quite often. And this sort of falls into the multi-generational living slash flex use, but it's aging in place where people like where they live, they like their town. Selling their home and moving someplace else may not be the best option for them. They're comfortable in their neighborhood. They don't want to make that change, but the existing home has just become too much space for them, or they need single level living as they're aging. So this is definitely an option that we're seeing a lot of people take advantage of. And yes, you can live in the ADU and you can rent out the main home. And that way you can, still be close by to see, make sure the tenants of your home aren't doing anything that they shouldn't be or are respecting the property the way that you hope they would, but also have your own space and move into the newer construction versus the existing home. Right. Does unfinished space such as a garage underneath count toward the 900 square foot allowed area? Um, This is going to be very specific town by town because what you're allowed to build. So typically, no, it does not count towards that 900 square feet. It would be the same as, some towns that allow you to build out a basement underneath. What they're trying to avoid is they're trying to avoid, building out a full basement, full 900 square foot living space. Then as soon as you get your final inspection, you have somebody else come in without a permit and finish off that basement, and now you've got an 1,800 square foot addition to your home. So those restrictions are what they're more concerned about. Now it's a matter of the site itself, building out a garage underneath the ADU. That might have some challenges to it depending on the site. But otherwise, as far as I know, unless there's town by town restrictions, then that should be allowed, but definitely won't count towards the 900 square feet of livable space. I have an existing 700 square foot in-law on the first floor of my house. Could I build an additional ADU on my lot? This is a good question, and we get questions like this often. Uh, it's going to depend on each town. Typically, what the state allows is one additional ADU per property. So if that in-law is already considered technically an ADU. You know, sometimes people build an in-law, but it didn't go through the permitting process of being an accessory dwelling. You know, then it may not show up on the town records. But when the town's looking at, you know, building a new ADU, if they follow the restriction of the one ADU per lot, then you would not be able to build one if you already have an existing ADU. Now, some towns have, allowed two ADUs per lot, or have some sort of, special requirement. So if it comes down to it, looking at the actual town, if there's not, specific, you know, notes in the bylaws saying that they're following the one ADU per property, we can always take a look and see what they'll allow, and at the very least, try to determine how likely it would be that they would allow a second ADU built. Because while you may need that variance and that special permitting process, some towns will make it easier than others to go through that process. But determining from before you start getting too far into the design, the build, determining whether you can actually do it within the town, that would be the first step, and that's something that we can explore. Um, Are the finishes you offer the only options available? No. So we have on when you're going through the cart, there's going to be an option for customer supplied options for each one. So if you select only customer supplied options, you'll notice that the price from your cart when you check out is going to be lower than the starting price that we have listed on our website. And that's because no finishes for kitchens, bathrooms, or if you want to choose your own siding, your own windows, those will all be deducted from the price. So you'll see the cost, and then from there, you can either choose to bring your own finishes. You can work with us to figure out, within your budget, what kind of finish options would be right for you. But no, you don't have to use just the ones that we offer. This is the way to sort of streamline the process, make it easier, and for the people that don't want the decision fatigue, all of the design choices, the analysis paralysis of looking at 10 different faucets and not knowing which one to choose. That's a way to make it easier. But for the people that have very, specific taste or specific style, we're more than happy to accommodate that as well. Can you talk about the financial stability of your company? Um, I don't know exactly, what you would like to hear about the financial stability, but again, if it's from the perspective of looking at as a new company that's building ADUs, and 6 months from now, are we going to be, filing for bankruptcy, be out of business, and now you've got a half-built ADU on your property? That's where the benefit of being powered by Sword Construction. New England Additions is a branch of Sword Construction. We've been in the construction business for over 10 years. So we have a very strong, no pun intended, foundation for our business, where we're not some risky startup or somebody that's coming in that's going to run out of money and can't finish the project. We are working on year round on the sword inside of the business. Now building out the New England Additions side of our business is just another branch to our company. So in terms of the financial stability, if that's where this question stems from, no, we've got that foundation with Sword Construction. We've been operating and successfully operating for over 10 years now. And now this is just a new piece that we're building onto it to take that same quality construction, with the meticulous, measures in terms of our quality control, and bring that to a larger audience with New England Additions, where we can offer that same sort of design and elevated aesthetic to as many people as possible in order to take advantage of the change in legislation. Is it allowable to separate the ownership of the ADU from the main house through the creation of condominium covenants? No. So as far as as I've seen, I've yet to see a town that has said otherwise. And the statewide legislation says that the ownership must remain the same. So you can't subdivide the lot and then sell the ADU, but keep the main house or vice versa. It is considered an accessory dwelling to the existing unit. So it's not, a new construction, and that's where it falls within those guidelines of the accessory dwelling. And you cannot make, a condominium or a separately deeded property. It's just, it is a piece of the existing property. Is it possible to build the ADU onto the existing dwelling? Uh, yes, it is possible. Where, sort of the feasibility side of it comes into play, is obviously looking at the structural components of the existing dwelling, and seeing what changes need to be made there. So, a good example would be the garage conversion that we were talking about at the very beginning. So whether it's the garage, whether it's onto the existing home, you, it was built to be used and structurally sound the way it was. Now, in order to add another level or another 900 square feet on top of what already exists, may require some additional structural elements in order to, A, receive a permit, B, pass inspection, and most importantly, be safe to be lived in by you or your family or whoever you're renting to, however you use it. So, is it possible? Yes, there just is another layer that needs to be factored in there of taking that existing dwelling, using what we have in place, and adding in any additional elements that would be necessary in order to make sure it's structurally sound. Right. Um, Then I saw a question about when I mentioned that Boston does not fall under the same statewide legislation. How does it differ from the statewide legislation? So, from my understanding, and again, this is all ever-evolving process. So we're sort of keeping an eye on things as they're changing, but being on the forefront of the ADU frontier, if you want to get cheesy about it. We're seeing things sort of adapting in real time. So since Boston can create its own zoning regulations, it seems like right now, they have some requirements that aren't requirements statewide or aren't allowed statewide. So owner occupancy is one of them. The owner needs to occupy either the existing unit or the new ADU. From everything that I can see, it seems like they are really pushing for the internal ADUs as well. And those are what are allowed by right. And anything that is detached from the existing or built onto the existing lot and not using the internal components of the existing residence, those all still require a special permit. So the internal units for owner occupied one, two, and three family homes. Those are pretty straightforward by right. Anything else is going to require some sort of special permitting. In your experience, could an ADU extend beyond the minimum side lot set by town zoning? Could they? Yes, with a special permit. So that would require going in front of the board and, needing to make the case to the planning board and to the town of, why you need to extend beyond those setbacks. Now, the likelihood of them accepting that is going to depend on if you have a good case to make. But I'm finding that for a lot of these towns where they're whether they want to allow ADUs or not, they're forced to by state legislation. So where they do have control, they're trying to maintain control, and where they have control is their existing setback regulations. So they can't be any stricter than the existing regulations. And we're finding a lot of towns are actually, loosening up the setback restrictions for ADUs versus what is, required for a primary dwelling. But generally those setbacks are set for a reason because they want to either make sure that neighboring lots so that in case if your neighbor was trying to tap into those side setbacks, they're not encroaching on your lot and your usability of the lot. But they want to make sure that there is some sort of uniformity. They also don't want to set a precedent where they allow it for one person. Now they've got to allow it for everyone. So, is it impossible to do? The answer is no. It will depend on the town and what they'll allow. But it does require some, additional, meetings and planning with the zoning board to see if allowed. If you add it onto the dwelling, can you sell it as two separate units, or can a single family home be changed to a two family? So you are not able to sell them separately. You can't use this ADU legislation to turn a single family into a condominium building. So no, you're not able to, the usability as a two-family home, is certainly there. But as far as selling it separately or creating separate deeds, that is not allowed. Did you mention two and three family homes could add an internal ADU? Yes, so that was when speaking specifically about Boston. But what we are finding is in towns in general, if you have two or three family homes, they can still be considered primary, or they still are considered primary residences. And any towns that have tried to say that you cannot build an ADU if you have a two or three family home, the state has struck that amendment to the bylaws out as not allowed. So they can't restrict you from building an internal ADU or a detached ADU if you have a two or three family home. So this doesn't just apply to single family homes, but in the past, the biggest restriction has been ADUs in zoned single family neighborhoods. So that's where the major change in the law has sort of opened the doors for ADUs. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's only single families that can add an ADU. So yes, two and three family homes can add internal or detached ADUs. Do we have any other questions? I'm going to give it another minute just in case anybody has anything else. Unless I see something else pop up. I'd like to thank you all again for joining us for our ADU webinar. I hope that you learned something today. I hope that everybody's still awake and I didn't bore you all to tears. You're going to receive an email after the webinar is concluded with a link to watch back and replay the webinar if you want to, if you missed a part, if you had to run to the bathroom, or if you just would like to hear some of that information again. If you do have any other questions that you think of after we conclude our session today, feel free to respond to that email with any questions, or if you would like to discuss further about how we could potentially bring an ADU to your property, reach out there and we'd be happy to continue the conversation. But otherwise, thank you very much. Again, newenglandadditions.com is our website, and that's where you'll find the Check My Lot feature to see what's feasible on your property, as well as the different models we offer, the pre-designed floor plans, and the pre-curated finish packages. And you can build out your dream ADU with those options and download your cart and take a look at the cost prior to site visit conditions from there. So thank you all once again, and we hope to hear from you soon. Take care.